Claudia. Who responded? Thank you, thank you, thank you. If I'd have said hi or hello, I bet you would have all said hi back to me. But I just said hi or hello, welcome, greeting, and you could say it, Claudia. Oh, now I feel at home. Naika Kwan, Naika Chaco, Kok, Ilihi, Copa Nanats, Misaika. I said, I am glad that I have come here to see you. I was asked to talk to you about my work in the prisons. How did that start? What got me involved in it? What do I do to help turn the lives around of these Indian men and boys? Well, the whole thing started, much to my surprise, one day when my telephone rang, and it was a call from the Capitol in Olympia, Washington State Capitol, stating that my name had been submitted to them as to be the Native American representative on the Religious Advisory Committee for the Washington State Board of Corrections. And I accepted it. And there was a Catholic priest and a Jewish rabbi and a Buddhist monk, and there were about 17 of us representing different cultures and religions of the world, representing prisoners in this, at that time, 17 Washington State prisons or correctional institutions. During the next several years that I served in that capacity, I visited Indian inmates in all of those 17 prisons. Later I was asked by the prison, or I shouldn't say prison, the Washington State Correction Facility in Shelton, to come and to work with the Indian men there. I've been working with them for over 11 years now in that particular facility. Then I received a request to work with the teenage Indian boys who are incarcerated. But these boys, instead of being a part of the Washington State Correctional Facilities, they are a part of DSHS, Department of Social Health Services, where the Department of Social Health Services take these boys ages 15 to 19 and provide a high school education for them. I worked with the Indian boys at Maple Lane for over 5 years until they closed Maple Lane down. I've been for over almost 5 years now working with the Indian boys incarcerated at Green Hill. There's quite a difference between working with these teenage boys and working with the older men. The men who are at the Washington State Correction Facility, they're usually what I'll call long-termers. A 5-year term is a short term, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years. So consequently, most of the men that I'm working with there now, they were there when I first started going there. They're the same group. Oh, now and then you get a new one. They're more stable. It's just a totally different type of work. Most of those men have had a relationship with their Native American culture and spirituality. Whereas the Indian teenage boys is a whole totally different ball game. Their terms are much shorter. In fact, the first time that they're incarcerated, it may be for 30 days. And then they're out a week or two and bingo, they're back in again for this time 90 days. Then next time, maybe a year. But you take, for example, the 4 to 5 years that I've been with the boys at Green Hill, I've got, they'll range anywhere from 14 to 19 boys in that group. Right now there's 16 of them. Been there between 4 and 5 years. Not a single one of these boys were there when I first went there. It's a real big turnover. You're just working with turnover all the time. Every week I may have somebody new and somebody's gone home. Some people have said to me, "Grandfather, aren't you afraid going into the prisons that you might get harmed or hurt?" To me, that question is so absurd. You see, there's no difference between them and my being right here with you. I'm letting that sink in. The thing is, in fact, there's not a one of us in this circle, this room tonight, that can say, "I've never done anything wrong." It's just that they got caught and you didn't. My working with them is just like if I was working with you. And those teenage boys, I've grown to love them like they were my own sons. But it's a very, very, very rare occasion that I have an Indian teenage boy come who was raised on the res or ever lived on the res. Not a one of them. Time and again, I'll ask, as the group keeps changing, I'll ask them different questions like, "How many of you have a dad at home?" Not a one of them. Not a one of them. They never had a dad at home with them. They may have 2, 3, 4, 5 brothers and sisters. One boy I recently had who's now finished his sentence and gone home, he had 17 brothers and sisters. No dad at home. Never raised on the res, so never had none of these teenage boys ever had any teachings as to what it is to be Indian. No grandma, grandpa to give them the Indian teachings. They knew they were Indian, but they didn't know what that meant. Not a one of them had ever been inside of a church. They have had no spiritual guidance or training of any kind. Most of them were street boys. Tacoma street gangs and so forth, that kind of situation. When they come into my group with no spiritual guidance or training, they're like ships without a rudder. On the high seas of life, at the mercies of every wind and current, whatever the wind or the current is, that's the way they go. And that's what brought them to the prison. So what do I do to try and turn their lives around? The first thing is to try and help them to understand what it means to be an Indian. To give the teachings. To introduce them to the culture. One of the first things that I did when I first started working with the boys, teenage boys, "Where's your drum?" They didn't have a drum. They didn't have a grandfather drum. They had no hand drums. And I give medicine wheel teachings to a number of different groups outside of the prison. So that next week, I met with 3 different groups. One of them was at Randall, and I'd had drum making workshops for all these people, and I said, "How many of you will be willing to gift your drum tonight to the boys?" I had my medicine wheel on the floor because I would be teaching the medicine wheel. If you're willing to donate your drum, come and lay it on this sacred altar on the medicine wheel. That night, 8 drums were laid on the wheel. And before the week was over, I had 19 drums. So the next week when I went back to the boys, I had 19 drums. Now, to teach them to sing. Well, this was quite an experience for me because the men, the older men at Shelton, at the prison, they knew how to sing. They had their own grandfather drum and they could really sing and they knew the songs. But these Indian teenage boys, They knew no songs. And to them, singing was for girls. And singing, for a boy to sing, is like being a sissy. And so I said, now, when you get out of here and you come to one of our powwows, and if you're invited to sit there at the powwow drum and you sing like that, you're going to really be in trouble. You're going to hear those people, those men and women, they belt it out. I finally got them to where they sang a little bit louder. At first it was, but finally they got to where they could really sing. There's something about the songs, the spirit of the songs, that begins to make an imprint upon their lives. Oh, I give the medicine wheel teachings, but I think that many times their singing has done more to begin to turn their lives around than anything else. Then teaching them to dance. Then I started teaching them to do beadwork. I taught them the running, locking stitch and the lazy stitch. And then, where is she? There she is. What a joy it was when you came and shared your beadwork with them. I mean, it was the peyote stitch. Yes, we taught them. But I don't know the peyote stitch, so she came. Then I bought looms for them, and we taught them loom beading. In time, well, we also built a sweat lodge for them, and now every other week they're in the sweat lodge. How many of you have heard of the 13 grandmothers? How many of you met Grandmother Margaret? Arapaho, Cheyenne Arapaho. She came, it was in August, to be with my boys, and up to this time, they'd only had a male pouring the sweat. And now Grandma Margaret poured the sweat for them. What an impact that made upon them. I've taken over 120 books to them for their Indian library. Everything I can think of to turn their lives around, to help them to realize what it is to be an Indian. Oh, some of them, you look at them, you swear they're full-blooded Indian just by their skin. And then some of them are just as black as the ace of spades, but they have Indian blood also, like some are white, but they have Indian blood. We're quite a mixture. Some of the things that have happened. I had one boy come to me just several months ago, probably 8, 9, 10 months ago. Grandfather, I won't be here next week. I'm going home. He was 15 years of age. He said, the first time I was incarcerated, I was 10 years old. Doesn't that break your heart? A 10-year-old in prison. He said, I was only in for 30 days, but I was out less than a week and I was back in again. He says, in the last 5 years, I've been in prison more than I've been out. In and out, in and out, in and out. He said, I knew I was an Indian, but he said, I never knew what it meant until you came. I came to your group. When I came, you were here. And with tears running down his cheeks, gave me a big hug, and he says, Grandfather, I just want to say thank you for your teachings, because I can tell you, I know that I'll never, ever be in prison again. I know now what it means to be an Indian. Another boy, this one, he was 17. He'd been out, he'd gone home, been out about a month and a half, and I was driving through Olympia and stopped at Tumwater at Fred Meyer's to buy some groceries, parked my car in the parking lot. I just stepped out of my car and I heard a voice hollering, Grandfather! And I heard it. Boy, you could just hear his feet pounding the pavement, running. Gave me a big hug and says, would you like to meet my mama? I said, "Oh, sure would." Well, Mama wasn't. But she came. He says, "You are the grandfather." She says, "For the last month and a half, all I've heard from my son since he's come home from the prison is a medicine wheel, grandfather, and he keeps drinking." He took one of the drums home with him. He's singing the songs. And she said, "He's not the same boy. You've changed his life. You've turned his life around." I never asked the boys, "Why are you here in prison? What caused you to come here?" It's none of my business. It's very, very rare that any of them will offer to me and tell me why. I figure if they want to tell me, that's fine. I'm not here to look at their past. I'm there to look at their future. I think it's out of the last several years, I've only had one boy who had been in a sweat lodge before he came to the prison. And they go to that sweat lodge every other Sunday, every other week in that sweat lodge. That makes a big difference in their lives. They give the negatives and all the bad to the sacred altar, to the fire. They walk out like a new creature, a new person. Not a one of them had ever been to an Indian powwow. So it took me a year of working with them, preparing them to put on their own powwow inside the prison. I wish you could have been there. I wish you could have been there. I had some of my own Callous tribal drummers there to sing, and I got as many different drums and grandfather drums and all there that I could get to join with them. But the boys had their own grandfather drum. Oh, I not only had those 19 hand drums, but then I had another person or a group donate a grandfather drum for them, and they would. The Indian people that came to that powwow said, "You can't make me believe that these boys have never been to a powwow before." They put on a marvelous, fantastic powwow. You don't put on a powwow like they put on without it having an impact upon your life. They have many different ways of showing their gratitude. I have several hand drums, but this is the only one I've been using for the last few years. This was hand painted by the boys, the teenage boys at Maple Lane that I worked with. This was their way of saying, "Thank you, grandfather, for coming and teaching us what it means to be an Indian." I could show you numerous things that they have given. The Indian men incarcerated at Shelton, the older men, they've been put on powwows right along for years. This year in August, I was not the only speaker. Grandmother Margaret of the 13 grandmothers and I were the two speakers. WCCC, Washington Correctional Center, powwow 2011. This was it was last year, not this year's. And if you'll see, on a loom, they each took their turn to bead their own name in it. And then they hung all these together and gave it to me and said, "We just don't want you to forget us." These kinds of things, they touch your heart. They grab your heart and your being and your soul. Again, I work with a lot of people outside the prison, And I find it's no different working with boys in the prison or men in the prison. I work with you outside. All of a sudden I get a call from some one of you and you say, my wife just kicked me out. So I start working, of course. There has to be a problem or she wouldn't have done it. Or vice versa, he kicked her out, whatever. Working with problems with people is no different outside than inside or inside than outside. But it's when I have people like you who came and gave of your time, you, Grandmother Margaret, and numerous others that have come, that you've made it possible to change their lives. They still talk about your visit. They're still doing the beating. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's time, I think, for open forum. I'm sure that sitting here, some of you have got some questions that I haven't answered with what I have said, and you're wondering, what about? Let's have those questions. Now, you know what is interesting? I can go to an elementary school, fourth graders, and I can give a little talk about the Indian tradition and way, and then I can throw it open to open forum for questions. And I'm thinking of, for example, here recently I was at the Napavine Elementary School, and I was supposed to have 1 hour. Well, they finally said, the buses have arrived, we've got to quit. Those kids just kept, there were always 10 to 15 hands in the air at the same time.
Could you talk about your hat that you're wearing?
Oh, talk about my hat that I'm wearing. Made of the cedar. It's traditional for our Pacific Northwest Coast tribes, and it serves a number of purposes. It sheds water. It's a good umbrella. But it's more than that. We do a lot of time out on the water in our canoes. For example, every year in July, our tribal canoe joins with other tribal canoes for the great intertribal canoe journey. We'll have anywhere from 90 to 120 canoes. These canoes are 32 to 42 feet long. If we've got 20 people in a canoe, and you got 100 canoes, you got 2,000 paddlers coming in when that armada comes into the final place. I think of here just 3 or 4 years ago, we made our journey to Cowichan, an Indian village on the eastern shore of Vancouver Island. We put in our canoe with the Skokomish tribe. It was over a 400-mile pull, a week and a half on the water, July in the sunshine. You don't want to get blistered? It's not just a rain hat, it's a sun visor hat. It protects us from the sun. Before the white man came here, we did not have this kind of clothing. Our clothing basically, and we did not wear, as many of you might think, we did not wear clothes out of deer hide and elk hide like they would on the plateau or the plains. Can you imagine what it's like in rainy country, walking around in wet, soggy leather stuff all day long? No. But our women would take the inner bark of the cedar, and then she would make our clothing. It'd be just as soft as the cotton that you wear now, but it would shed water. The cedar would shed the water. So cedar was, the Creator was good to us here in the Pacific Northwest and given us the cedar tree. We consider the cedar tree to be very, very, very sacred. From the cedar tree, we did not live in teepees. We lived in longhouses. They were made by splitting the cedar. You can take the cedar splits this so nice. Even today, you may have cedar shakes on your roof, your house. It just splits up so nice. But we split planks 2 feet wide, 20 feet long. And this with the walls and the roof of your longhouse. The cedar tree gave us protection from the elements of the weather. But we also then made our clothing out of it. Our transportation, well, before we saw the horse, all of our transportation was basically the canoe from the cedar tree. From the cedar tree, we made our baskets. The baskets could be used for gathering food or watertight for bringing water to the lodge. And before the white man came, we never saw metal pots and pans. And so, how did we cook our meals? In the basket. How can you cook a meal in a basket and it not burn up? I have a basket in my collection that's been in my family for a little over 200 years. It belonged to one of my great-great-great-grandmothers before white man ever came here, and it was her cooking basket. Watertight. Fill it with water. And then take those red-hot stones from the fire. How many of you have been in a sweat lodge? Oh, okay. You know how some of those stones can at times be just translucent red, like the red on your electric range. Well, she'd take the little sticks, cooking sticks, take the small red-hot stones from the fire, lower into her cooking basket, and then put her camas or whatever she wants to cook in there, put a little reed mat in the top, and she'll cook a meal in that basket as quickly and as efficiently as you will today on your electric range. It's the cedar tree, our housing, our clothing, our travel, our food gathering. We can make rope. She'd make rope from the cedar bark, and from the rope make nets to catch fish or birds. There wasn't an aspect of our lives, not a single aspect of our lives, we're not impacted with the gift that the Creator gave us in the cedar tree. This is just one part of that. And this, the button blanket, is traditional for our Northwest Coast people. And that's a bear on the back. Why a bear? Much like my ID card. It's telling me that I was born into the Bear Clan in my tribe. I'm a Bear Clan man, and no, that's just my clan. Any other questions? Oh.
Grandfather, could you give us an example of how you would teach lessons to these young boys through the medicine wheel?
How I would do what?
A medicine wheel lesson that would help these boys.
How would I give them a medicine wheel lesson? When I first begin teaching them, I just want to give them a basic overview of the wheel. Where the sacred altar, that's the dwelling place of the Creator. The outer wheel is the human part of the wheel. And the inner wheel is the totem powers of the Great Spirit. And these are 4 pathways, and I tell them, you are the wheel, and the wheel is you. So the Creator, or the Great Spirit, or Hayasug Holy Tai, the Great Chief of the above, or God, as some of you say, is not somewhere out there. But you are the wheel, and the wheel is you. So centered in yourself is finding the Creator within you. Then if that's the Creator within me, how do I experience the Creator within me, or the Great Spirit, or the God within me? These are 4 pathways, and so all these animals all have their lessons. But after giving them just a brief overview, taking about an hour of giving them that brief overview, then the next time I'm with them, I take them back to the wheel to show each one of them individually what their birth totem power is. And I would ask, when were you born? March. And I immediately go to your animal, plant, and mineral totem, and I say, are you, and I'll start asking about or you like to write, or do you like to sing, or do you whatever? And they look at me, how'd you know that? Because the medicine wheel tell me. I not only then teach them what their own medicine power is, but I say, now be careful. Don't just wait until I get to your totem power. Remember, you are the wheel, and the wheel is you. And maybe one reason why you're in this prison is because that totem power on the opposite from where you came in, that's your weakness. And we got to deal with that weakness and help you to learn to work on that weakness to bring it into balance with your strength. Because a wheel, can you imagine going down the road with your buggy and a wheel and three of the spokes go out of it? What's going to happen? It may just fall complete collapse, or you may be going humpity bump down the road, and that's what's happened. You guys here in this prison, the wheel of your life is out of balance, and we got to go over there and repair that broken spoke. And so I start working with them on their weaknesses to bring them in balance with their strengths. And these are just a few of the small. There are many, many other things, but that's just kind of a basic, brief answer to your question of how I use the wheel. It's like an Indian Bible. It gives you lessons on not only your spirituality, but in the plant totems, it's giving you lessons on herbal lessons for your health. It gives you lessons for your sociological life. There's not an area of your life, there's not a thing happened in your life if this wheel doesn't deal with that. How many of you follow the Christian tradition? Either have or do, or okay. Do you think that you could ever know and understand all of the lessons that are in that Bible? Tens of thousands of lessons. There are as many lessons in this wheel right here in front of you as there are in that white man's Bible. Tens of thousands of lessons. There's nothing in your life that happens that this wheel does not respond to it. And so sometimes I may just, in working with the boys, any of you had any problems this week? Sometimes they do. Sometimes they get into fisticuffs with each other, and they're boys, they're teenagers, and they still have problems in prison as well as out. Well, what kind of problem do you have? And then I go to the wheel. Okay, what can the wheel tell us about this? And I work with their problems right from the wheel, deal with what is the nitty-gritty of life and how the rubber is meeting the road in their life today, this week. Another question. Oh, now we're getting more hands. I like that.
So you said that you teach these boys what it means to be an Indian. And I wonder what it means to be an Indian, and more than that, what does it mean to those of us whose tribal memories are crushed and lost in the dustbin of history for 1,000 years?
That last question, the second one, what it means.
To those of us who our tribal ancestry has been crushed and lost in the dustbin of history for 1,000 years.
And what's your question about that problem?
Well, what does it mean to be an Indian?
Okay, but what does it mean to be an Indian? And that's tied in with your second question. What does it mean to be an Indian? First, if you were to ask me, what is the religion, our religion, no matter which tribe, which culture, and note this, there's no such thing as the Indian culture. There are many Indian cultures. Our Pacific Northwest Coast Cultural Group has many differences, say, from the Plains tribes and so forth. But for all of us, no matter who we are, our religion is the tradition of our ancestors. To get back in touch with the ancestors. Now, again, where there may be many differences, for example, how our tribe, as opposed to tribe on the plains, would do vision questing. There are many similarities and many differences. Yet one thing that is common in all of our tribes on the northern hemisphere is that we are Earth Mother oriented. And so we learn our lessons from the four-leggeds, the wingeds, the swimmers, the crawlers, the green people, the stone people. We're Earth Mother oriented. What it means to be Indian is to be in harmony with the Creator's work of creation. To get in touch, you who are Indian of heritage, you have an Indian heritage, but your tradition has been crushed. It hasn't been stamped out completely. Whatever your tribe, there are those who know something of your tradition, and you can find that. I think of, for example, in the 80s and 90s, there were 3 different times that I was flown back to the Cherokee tribe in North Carolina. That's the Eastern Band. The Western Band, Tahlequah, Oklahoma, but the Eastern Band flew me back. They don't call it the reservoir, they call it the boundary. Flew me back there. I spent a week each time teaching the medicine wheel teachings. 9 to 12 in the morning, an hour break for lunch, 1 to 4 in the afternoon, a 3-hour break for dinner, 7 to 10 at night. 9 hours a day they would listen to me. Can you sit here and listen to me for 9 hours? For 6 days straight in a row, from Mondays through Saturday. That first visit that I had with them, some of the young men, there was about 4 or 5 of them that were, I would say they were in their early 20s. And the group was kind of small then. By the end of the week, I was running over 140 some, but the first session I had 8 people. And it just slowly grew. But these young men, they said, but we've lost our culture. We don't know any of the old rituals and ceremonies. We don't know the old stories. They're lost, they're gone. Crushed? I said, I don't believe that. I'm sure you've got elders in your tribe that know. No, nobody knows anything anymore. Along about the middle of the week, or that was later in the week, and when I had 140 some there that night, there were some old long hairs there. And I turned to one old man, grandfather. I said, you know what I'm talking about. I'm trying to talk to you from my Northwest culture, but your Cherokee culture does this in a little different way. Tell them what it is. And he started opening up, and these young men, they go, oh, he does know the old ways. There was a professor at Lower Columbia College in Longview who in the 1980s wrote a book about my tribe entitled, it's a history of the 19th century only, and she titled The Dispossessed Cowlitz. And she was in it, by the time you end with that, reading her book, she has us totally crushed. You have no land, it's all taken from you. You don't have the language. You don't have any of your culture. Everything is gone, lost, crushed. So now I'm writing the history to show on the repossession. I say, no, it was never lost. It was in hibernation for a while. White man came along and pushed us so, but we have, at that point when she wrote it, we didn't have an inch of land. Today we have 33 pieces of land that we own as a tribe. We sing our songs. We have our sweat lodge. When she wrote it, we didn't have any of that stuff. We're in the canoe journey. It was just in hibernation. It wasn't lost. It wasn't crushed to the extent that you haven't been able to find it and experience it. But it's there. It's there. I guarantee you, whatever your tribe, it's there and you can find it. You just have to bring it out of hibernation. But it's there. And one more thing that I'll say, and then I want to catch your question next. Some of them during that time saying we lost our culture. I said, tell you what, I'm going to challenge you. Every single ritual and ceremony of any tribe came at some point in the past history with a vision given to one of your ancestors. And if the Creator sees the overall, what we call past, present, and future, but the Creator sees it all as just one grand picture. There's no such thing as past, present, and future. The Creator who could give that vision to your ancestor 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years can give it to you. Go on a vision quest. They hadn't heard of vision quests. So then I had to prepare them for vision quest, which 5 years later, that was one reason why I was called back, because they went on their vision quest. And they came back with ceremonies and rituals, only to find that the elder said, oh yeah, I remember now. Oh, I remember that. We did that when I was a kid. Same ceremonies. So what I'm trying to say is that you not only get it from the elders, but many times you need to go on a vision quest, and what you feel is crushed. It may be crushed, but it isn't stamped out. The Creator can give to you what the Creator gave to your ancestors, and you can find it again. Ceremonies and games to help the boys or the men in the prison. I actually haven't been playing any games, though we do have our Indian games. The games are really so specially tribal. Each tribe with its own particular kinds of games. But ceremonies and rituals, I teach them to sing. That's ceremony. I teach them to dance. That's ceremony. The sweat lodge. These are the kinds of things that I do. But if I get them just doing their beadwork, one other thing I've done is I've challenged them with making their own shield. Now, when you think of the word shield, you're thinking of something that might protect me from bullets or arrows or whatever. No, it has nothing to do with that. Nothing like that at all. It's like, what's the word I want to use? England or Scotland, the coat of arms. Your shield has pictures on it that tells something about who you are. Let's take, for example, go back into the 1800s, when the tribes on the plains would, once a year, would have this great gathering of all the tribes, and maybe several thousand teepees. And you're there and you're wondering, where is Lame Deer's teepee? And all of a sudden there's his shield on the front of it. Oh, that's his ID. So I challenged the boys. You know your own personal life, the experiences. Maybe you want to talk about on your shield something about what brought you here. Maybe you don't. What are the things in life, and what is your hope to be, and what are your dreams, and do it all with the animal figures and so forth, and have them. And this becomes a ceremony of its own kind that really has an impact. They're talking about where they've been and where they are and what their dream is for the future. I've had sometimes, every sweat I pour is different. I never pour two sweats exactly alike, but one of the sweats, for example, that I poured for the Indian boys, these teenage boys, I said, now, this is the Sundance medicine wheel that I've been teaching to you. Grandfather Sun rises in the east and begins a new day. Grandfather Sun dances to the south and reaches its highest peak. That's the time of the day with the greatest warmth. Grandfather Sun dances to the west and sets in the west, bringing on the darkness of night. And then Grandfather Sun dances under. When Grandfather Sun rises in the east, in the time of beginnings, that's our childhood. When Grandfather Sun reaches the highest place in the heat, that's the heat and the passions of life. That's youth. When Grandfather Sun sets in the west, that brings on the maturing of the day. That's the maturing of life, the adults, and it finishes with the elders. So I said, now today, we're going to go through 4 rounds in the sweat. On this first round, I want you to share with each of us, each one of you when it's your turn, to share with us what is the worst thing that ever happened to you as a child? Maybe it was something so bad that you've never shared it with anyone. You didn't even share it with mom, but you're going to share it today. One by one, they shared. There were a couple of them that had difficulties doing it. They got choked up and began to cry. Boys. It was difficult for them to tell how their uncle sexually assaulted them. It was hard for them to tell that. But when we got through with that round, we went to the second round. Now I want you to tell me everything that happened to you as a teenager. The worst thing that ever happened to you as a teenager. In the third round, what do you hope will happen to you as an adult when you go? And what is your vision when we get to the fourth round? Can you take all those negatives, all those bad things, and throw them into those ideas and all those bad memories into that sacred fire, those hot rocks, just like you would throw a pine cone into the fire. Let them be consumed, believing that when you leave here, those are gone. And you can believe in your future. There have been several of those boys after they've left. See them 2, 3, 4 years later. And that's one sweat that they always refer back to. And they say, what I have been hoping for is happening, is taking place in my life. There are a lot of different ways of using ceremony and ritual to change lives. That's just a little bit of it. Am I running out of time? Or is there more? Are there more questions? Oh, we got more questions here. Okay, this one and then that one.
What do you do to connect the youth when they leave to their tribal elders on the outside so that they don't get lost in the
I do my best to get them into a connection with some tribal elders somewhere. Sometimes that's impossible for me to do. They're going back from the east. They were here from the east when they got into trouble, and they're going back, and I don't have those connections. There are some of them that I'm thinking this one boy that I told you about, that Fred Myers, that came, and he introduced me to his mama. And he said, I sure wish there was some place where I could get these medicine wheel teachings so I could continue going to them. I said, where is it you live? And he says, Yelm. I said, I got a group of medicine wheel people in Yelm. I tell you what, I said, that is like next Wednesday night. I'll come and I'll meet you in Yelm. Tell me where to meet you, and I'll take you there and introduce you to them. So then instead of tribal people, I put them in there. But others, I put them in touch with tribal elders in their own tribe, like Skokomish or Nisqually and some of these. There's some of them, when they leave me, they aren't going home. They're going to a rehab home, or they'll be going to LaSalle, which is a different prison. One of my boys, he was the leader of the group. He had the rest of them right in his paw of his hand. When I first went there, I think he kind of didn't like the fact that I was coming, and so he was negative towards me for quite a while. But he was one of the long-termers. He had a 5-year sentence, and when you turn 19, you can't stay. You have to go to the big prison. So the last month or so, I'm meeting with him every week, I noticed that he was very sullen. And finally I said to him, I said, are you sick? No, I'm scared. I'm scared when I go to Shelton what those men are going to do to me. And I said, well, I know the Indian group. Now, when you first go to Shelton, you don't go to this group that I work with. You're put in a hold, and then you decide where you're going to go from there. And there are 3 different groups of Indian people. And the only ones to get in my group are the well-behaved ones, and he hadn't been that. But I said, that prison owes me a favor. I've done a whole lot for them, so I'm going to ask them to do me a favor and put you in with that group. And if you get with that group, they will take care of you. You'll never have to worry about anything. You know, not only will protect you, they'll teach you, they will guide you. They're a wonderful group of Indian men. And I was able to get them in with that group. So I do, each boy is different and how you do them, but I do my best to get help on the outside for them. First of all, if possible, with Indian people of their own tribe, if I can, but many times that's impossible. So I just get the best that I can get, whatever. I saw a hand.
Today, there was a horrible shooting in Connecticut. Do you know about that?
Today there was, what did she ask?
There was a shooting in Connecticut today.
Oh, a shooting in Connecticut.
There was, so last week there was a shooting in a mall here.
Yes, Clackamas?
Yes.
Yeah.
And today there was a mass shooting at a grade school in Connecticut.
Hey, what's your question?
I'm not sure what my question is. I feel like these things are happening. These really horrible things are happening. And I would just like to hear what you can tell us about that, or
What can I tell you about it?
You know.
We see these events, tragic, horrendous, but in one form or another, those events are taking place in our own personal lives, every single one of us. There are times we are doing the shooting of our own selves. We are, you become angry with your sister or that other person in this group or in the, your neighbor or whoever, and and you may have done it all without them knowing it. It's just in your home, you're the blue. Who have you hurt the most? Yourself. Yourself. But you committed the shooting of yourself spiritually. What can we do? We need to learn to show honor and respect all people. As we sit in this circle, ho, 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 ho. These people over here, they can see that key pointing right at them. These people, all they see is the black blunt edge of it. These people over here, they're seeing something of a side view of it. You're all getting a different view of it. Which one of you has the valid view? Are all of your views valid? That person that you're upset with is because they're just so diametrically opposite from you. They go, Can I learn to honor and respect you no matter how opposite you are from me and everything, realizing that the wheel says your view of life is just as valid as mine? Maybe I stop shooting myself so much. I find a life more of peace and honor and respect. Many times what we need to do is feel sorry for these other people who are doing these things. Before I had this banner of this wheel, I used to always set this up with stones. So I had the crystal and the silver and the turquoise and the fire opal and the chrysocolla and all these stones. I kept them in a little box that I'd made with little divisions so that they could all sit in there. Had them in my car. It was over 120 feet from the road back in the drive to the house. I never walked the car. One morning I got up to go out and get the newspaper across the street. As I walked out onto the street, I was driving the street, there was this box. That box sure looks familiar. It was my box. Somebody during the night had come all the way in the driveway knowing that box was in my car, taking it, evidently probably dropped the stones in a bag or something and threw the box on the street. Now, I could have become very angry. Those stones were very sacred to me. I could have done a Clackamas shooting inside myself. God, that damn son of a, you know what. But I realized that when you take something that's sacred for someone else, you are in trouble spiritually yourself. I felt sorry for whoever it was. I found myself standing in the street. As much as I was in pain at my loss, Creator wrapped that person in a blanket of protection so they don't get hurt for the big mistake they made. I felt sorry for them. That night, I met with one of my clans to teach the wheel, and I had no stones. I told them what had happened. Within a week, from 3 of my different clans, I've been gifted all the stones I needed to replace my wheel. They had an opportunity to give of themselves. What had been a Clackamas shooting, you might say, in a way, in a sense, had become a way of people being blessed in giving. I think attitude is a key word here. How many of you people here are in or have been in real estate sales? Now, you know the key word is location, location, location. For the rest of us, the key word in life is attitude, attitude, attitude. Never forget that. If you forget everything else I've said tonight, remember, the key word in life is attitude, attitude, attitude. No matter what happens, your attitude is a crucial part of your life. I felt sorry for that person. For those who follow the Christian tradition, remember what Jesus said on the cross, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I said that same kind of thing. Creator, that person who stole that, they didn't know what they were doing. Forgive them. Forgive them. Forgiveness. What is true forgiveness? I'm taking more time than I should here, but I feel it's important. I feel that some of you need to hear this. Let's suppose that you did something to offend me. But we meet once a week in a group, and here I am back, and you may say, apologize. Say, Grandfather, I'm really sorry, I apologize. And I might say, oh, I forgive you. But down inside, I'm saying that because I know if I don't, I'm a bad boy. Everybody expects me to forgive you, but inside I'm still angry. So did I really forgive you? No. But let's suppose that you touched my heart, and in that moment, my whole attitude changes, and when I say I forgive you, it's honest, but not until you apologized. Now, what happens if my love for you is so great that in the very moment you did the offense, my heart said, I forgive you. And you were forgiven before you apologized. You just got the blessing of it after you made the apology, but my forgiveness was already there. That is the kind of forgiveness I believe that the Great Spirit has for all of us. That is true forgiveness. That's attitude, 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 attitude. Some people ask me, say, have a good day. Oh, probably not all of you realize I'm as old as I am. Some of you probably think I'm in my 60s. I have sons in their 60s. In a little over 14 years, I'll be celebrating my 100th birthday. And somebody say, have a good day. I say, I've never had a bad day in my life. Attitude, attitude, attitude. Well, it's just some days been better than others. Attitude. That's what we have to take. We feel sorry for not only those in the shooting, but for the person who did it. But we reflect back on our own lives. How many times have I done, not with a gun, but I've done it with words, feelings, attitudes. We're all guilty of it. But maybe we can learn from this, and life can be a beautiful thing. I love life. Life has been beautiful. It can be for you too. Some of you are living a hell of a life. Excuse the language, but that's just it. But the life that you're living is your own. You can't blame mom or dad or the school teachers or your kids or anybody else. You may not believe me, but I'm telling you that you are exactly what you want to be. And if you want to be different, you can make the change. We, all of us, are what we have manufactured ourselves. You are the one that made the decision, do I or don't I? And you make the decision what you do. Nobody makes it for you. Oh, there may be those that are influencing you, saying you should do it this way, but you made the decision whether to go with them or not. You, every one of us here, have potential far, far beyond anything that any of us have achieved. If somebody would take writing my books, 33 books, potential. Let me just briefly say, I had the greatest mother who ever lived. I firmly believe it. I may be prejudiced, but I believe that there was never in the history of humanity a mother more fantastic than my mama. She taught me to read and write before I went to kindergarten. At the age of 4, before kindergarten, I wrote my first book. I still have that original copy. But World War II broke out when I was in junior high school, and we were supposed to be learning grammar, composition, spelling, and all of that in what they called a social studies time. We were lucky if we got 10 minutes of that once a month. The rest of the time, it was talking about what happened in the war in the last 24 hours, Mussolini, Hitler, and Stalin, and on and on and on. So when I finished high school and went to enter college, they said, we're sorry. We can't allow you to enter here because you are deficient in your English and grammar. The very thing I wanted to do, be a writer. We can only allow you in if you will promise to take private tutorship. And I gladly accepted that, and so I took private tutorship. For the first year I was in college. Then when I finished college, I still was, all my work was writing was just for the college assignments. When I got out on the outside, one day I was in a doctor's office. You know, if your appointment is 9 o'clock, you're never going to begin at 9. You're going to maybe 9:30, 10, 10:30 before you get your turn. And they got those tables there with all those magazines. So you're spending time looking at magazines. You know what I'm talking about. Well, this day I was there and I was looking, and here was this magazine, was this article, big black border around it. Would you like to be a published author? I sure would. It was a correspondence school. Write a paragraph on this topic, and if we accept it, we will guarantee we will make you a published author. My first thought was, it doesn't matter what I write. This is a commercial thing. They want my green frog skins, my dollar bills. But I wrote the best paragraph I knew how, and I thought I'd written a good one. Can you imagine what I felt when I got my letter back from them, which simply said, Mr. Wilson, we are sorry, but you will never be a published author. And I was calmed down. But I've written 33 books. I have been published, and I've been published in many magazines. Right now I have 2 weekly columns in the 2 different newspapers. A regular columnist. Yes, I'm a writer. There was a potential far above. And I just determined to reach out for that potential. And I believe it's even greater than I've gone yet. It's more. Your potential is greater than anything you've achieved so far, and some of you have been great achievers. Does it take whoever this person is in this room tonight, who is the greatest achiever, you've achieved more than anybody else in this room. you still haven't reached your goal, your climax, your full potential. You still have more. There's no limit to what you can do. May the Creator go with you and bless you. Close Cockwell. Linda, thank you. Bless you. Bless you. Bless you. So appreciate you. And Rod, Creator bless you too.